Reimagining the movement to end gender violence means changing the conditions that create and deepen violence, and it means responding to the particular risk that some people have being the victims of violence. So first and fundamentally, reimagining the movement to end gender violence means focusing on and reinvesting in people. It means providing jobs, education, childcare. It means making welfare a hand up instead of a dead end. That's the first step in reimagining. We know, for example, that domestic violence is a major cause of women's homelessness. We know domestic violence makes women poor, but we also know that poor women are more vulnerable to domestic violence. That's why it's not enough to provide services for women who've been identified as battered. What we need to do is to provide services for everyone, and that will prevent battering. We also know that men in heterosexual households who have experienced unemployment bouts are much more likely to commit domestic violence. In fact, research shows that they're twice more likely to commit domestic violence than are men who have stable employment. So reinvesting in people will help us to stop domestic violence. Reimagining the movement to end gender violence also means recognizing the impact of mass incarceration and the drug wars. So what do I mean by that? Right now we have more than 2 million people, roughly the size of Houston, Texas, behind bars. But that's not the end of it. We have something like 5 more million people who are under the control of the criminal justice system on probation or on parole. What does that have to do with gender violence? Well, here's what it has to do. The reason that all those people are behind bars, or the reason many of them are behind bars, has to do with the drug wars. The drug wars have focused enforcement in minority communities, in communities of color, poor urban communities. The irony of this enforcement is that it actually creates the very social conditions that in fact create more violence. It does that because by removing so many people from a community who are at their prime wage earning years and at their prime child care providing years, it diminishes the economic resources of an entire community. It also means that people in that community are unlikely to see law enforcement as a source of help rather than a source of oppression. So reimagining the movement to end gender violence recognizes that the drug wars and mass incarceration and that form of policing actually deepens violence in communities and makes people at greater risk for intimate partner violence and sexual assault. So at the end of the day, what do we mean when we say reimagining the movement to end gender violence? We mean placing all of our work in a larger structural framework. We mean reimagining a call to the people of the United States, a call to our elected officials to address the inequalities that deepen violence, that create violence, and recognizing that you cannot be against violence against women, you cannot be against interpersonal, or rather intimate partner violence, and not oppose all of these kinds of inequalities that create the very violence that you seek to end.